Everybody, myself Srijesh, Assistant Professor, Department of Biotechnology, St. Aloysius College, Mangaluru. Welcome to the course on Quality Assurance and Quality Control. Today, we are going to discuss a topic on good manufacturing practices. GMP, the good manufacturing practices. Any manufacturing industries, whether it is in pharma or food, they need to follow certain regulatory requirement. These regulatory requirement will assure the quality and effectiveness of the product. Today we are going to look into the current good manufacturing practices, what we are following in pharma industries, how they are being evolved, the chronological development of GMP, the history of GMP. That will be the major learning objective. So, once again, welcome. When we talk about quality, we have certain criteria in our mind. For example, when you are planning to buy a new car, the quality will be based upon our perception. It can be based upon the color, or it can be based upon the condition. It can be, if you don't have enough money, your quality will be based upon how long the vehicle. If you are planning to buy a second hand vehicle, you need to know about the previous histories. So you will be checking the document. So that document will be telling you about the choice. Sometimes your idea will be based upon the engine, the size of engine, what cc is your, or it may be based upon the registration details or the age, make or mode, see, model. All those things may be your criterias which will be helping you to assess the quality. The same thing when we talk about in the case of a healthcare industry. Is it possible to do such kind of a decision by seeing the external features? This slide gives you a comparison. Quality choices in the case of the healthcare industry. In the healthcare industry, when it is coming, the choices, instead of engine size, it will be the right strength, the right amount of active pharmaceutical ingredient that is present. In the place of age and registration, it may be the expiry date. Instead of the document, it can be the batch records. Instead of condition of the vehicle, it can be the contamination, if it is contamination free. Instead of the color, it will be the right appearance of the tablet, the right appearance of the syrup what we are going to take. Instead of the model or the make, it may be the right product that we are going to get. So, simply I can say that you cannot tell just by looking into a tablet or a drug that it is of good quality. There should be something in different. If a drug has been manufactured under a prescribed standard conditions, and if you have such kind of a label on the bottle which says that these products are being manufactured under a good condition, surely the customers, surely the patients will be choosing such kind of medicines. It is very obvious. So we are going to discuss about such kind of a certification, such kind of a regulation which will be ensuring the quality, effectiveness and safety of the product. It is nothing but the good manufacturing practices. I told you that the pharma industry or the health industry, it works on a fundamental idea of trust. Trust is the fundamental principle of this healthcare industry. The patients put a trust on the doctor, or the doctor put on a kind of trust on a manufacturer. And if you want to maintain this trust industry, we need to ensure that the products are being manufactured under a good standard conditions, which will be ensuring the quality. When we say about quality, the quality of a drug will be evaluated by two parameters. One is the drug should be safe, and the drug should be effective for the purpose for which we are going to use it. So these two parameters should be fulfilled. To fulfill this, the drug need to be manufactured from the raw material to the end product. We have to ensure the quality, not just by testing the end product quality. That is not sufficient. So coming to the history, before moving to the history, we will just see what is GMP. I already told you GMP stands for good manufacturing practices. And another terminology we will be discussing in coming is current good manufacturing practices. In US, the US FDA defines their regulations as current good manufacturing practices. They have named it as current good manufacturing practices. So what the GMP gives? GMP is a set of guidelines for the manufacturer of drug or a medical device or a food product. And when I say it is for the manufacturer, it should cover all the aspects of manufacturing, is it? So it will be covering all the concept of safety, effectiveness of product during all stages of manufacture. So if you see the definition of GMP, the different organizations has given different definitions. Here we are going to look into the WHO definition, how WHO is defining GMP. According to WHO, the World Health Organization, GMP is a part of quality assurance which ensures that products are consistently produced and controlled to a quality standard appropriate to their intended use and as required by the marketing authorization. I'll just give you a brief outline about this particular definition. When you split the entire definitions into different points, different aspects, the first parameter is it is a part of quality assurance. So we know that quality assurance is a process based. It is a policy of the manufacturer. So it is a process based approach to ensure the quality. It's a part of quality assurance. So if you want to implement the quality assurance team can implement the GMP principles. And when we implement the GMP, what it ensures? It ensures that products are consistently produced. How we can achieve this consistency of product? When you have a written procedure for a manufacturing, if you follow that same written procedure and the same conditions, surely you will be able to reproduce the results. So every time during the manufacturing, the same kind of the product can be produced, which says that the amount of active ingredient present in the drug will be same always. So their effectiveness, there will not be no compromise. And we know that from the raw material to the end product, in GMP we are maintaining a particular standard. Hence, we will be maintaining the quality standards. The quality standards that is required for the intended use. When we use that word intended use, many of you may be knowing, listeners, you may be knowing the intended use of the product, the standard of the intended use of the product will vary according to their use. For example, in the case of pharmaceutical product, it requires a purity of around 99.99%. So you need to have a system which will be ensuring that in both your manufacturing stage, especially in the case of a biopharmaceutical industries, you can divide them into two areas. One is the upstream processing, that is the USP, and the second one is the DSP. So we need to ensure the quality in both the USP as well as the DSPs. Now the next question is, why we need to know about all these basic aspects, the history aspects. According to the GMP, it is mandatory, one kind of mandatory requirement is this, training. When we are giving the training for the industry people, as per the GMP guideline, it is very clearly mentioned that everyone in the industry should know the story how the GMP have come to be, how it is evolved. And to obtain and maintain the GMP complaints, every manager, every supervisor should provide frequent, meaningful GMP reminders, trainings, which will be helping to develop all employees competent for their task. So that is the effectiveness of training, the GMP training, which will make the person competent for their job role. Okay, so we have seen that it's very important to know the timeline, the evolution of GMP, and when we are going to discuss about the evolution of GMP, these are the timeline, the evolution of GMP. In 1906, till 1906, there were no written guideline. We all know that when this kind of written guidelines might have evolved, when there is an adverse event that is being happened, when there is a tragedy that is being happened, all these tragedies will be acting as an eye opener for our governing body, is it? So all governments will be acting only if there is a tragedy, only if there is an incident, only if when an adverse condition has happened. Similarly, in 1906, such kind of an adverse event led into the implementation of Pure Food and Drug Act. Later, in 1938, Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act came into the picture, and 1941, in 1940s especially, the initiation of GMP has begun. But still, there was not a formal structure for GMP. But in 1963, the establishment of GMP for drug came into picture. And in 1975, GMP for blood and components final rule came. And in 1978, GMP for drug and medical device has been established. In 2012, the latest GMP guidelines for drug is being amended. We will see what are the kinds of incidents which acted as an eye opener and led into the evolution of GMP. In 1900s, one tragic incident that is happened was the tetanus toxin, the tetanus that is been happening. So when children received the antitoxin for diphtheria treatment, we know that now the newborn children, they will be undergoing different kinds of vaccination and immunization. As a part of that, in 1900s, when the children received an antitoxin for diphtheria, many children have died, and when these children were examined, they found that they died because of tetanus. And what was the reason? The antitoxin that is given was contaminated with the tetanus toxin. That means it was not manufactured under an hygienic condition. The proper hygienic conditions, good hygienic practices were not maintained, and that led into the contamination of the antitoxin. That acted as an eye opener, and a first kind of an amendment happened that is called as the Biologic Control Act. So as per the Biologic Control Act, which is passed in 1902, it says that improve the assurance of safety and purity of sera, vaccine and other biological product is essential. So what is required is inspection of manufacturers and sellers of biological product is required. Testing of such product for purity and strength is required. So that was the essence of the Biological Control Act. It was not strong. By the statement itself, we can see that it is not strong, and it was not strong at all. And later, this Biologic Control Act was amended in the form of Food and Drug Act, that is happened in 1906, and it was later again revised it into the form of Food, Drug, Cosmetic Act, that is in 1938. All these incidents what we are talking is with reference to the US scenario. And another, this what we are talking is about a report that came in a magazine called the Jungle. The Jungle editor, who called as the Upton Sinclair, he wrote in the magazine Jungle about the unhygienic production of beef. How beef was produced in an unhygienic condition, where he was describing that. In his description, we can read it very clearly. The beef was being produced from deceased cattle, rotten meat, contaminated meat, and where you can see that such report that came into the Jungle made the public little panic. You can see that they are telling that ground meat sometimes contain remains of poisonous rat. That means in such an unhygienic condition it is being manufactured. And even unfortunate workers who fell into the machinery are also grounded and packed along with the grounded meat. Such a pathetic condition is being explained in the magazine General. This is the picture of the jungle magazine, and you can also see that in an unhygienic condition how the beef is being produced. The meat was poisonous meat. So this created the public involvement, public movement happened. As a result, in 1906, the Pure Food and Drug Cosmetic Act is being passed. So the US Congress they passed the Pure Food and Drug Act in 1906. So as per the Pure Food and Drug Act, for the first time it became illegal to sell any contaminated, now we use the word adulterated, food or meat. Labeling had to be truthful, that is another advice that is being put forwarded by the Pure Food and Drug Act. Labeling have to be truthful. No longer could anyone promise on the label the moons and the stars. The law authorized inspectors from the US Department of Agriculture to stop any bad or mislabeled meat from entering interstate and foreign commerce. So that was a good initiative. And another tragedy which acted as an eye-opener was the sulfonamide tragedy. Sulfonamide was considered as a wonder drug and was very popular, especially the children were taking it for their sore throat, and even it was being used against the gonorrhea. And one company during initially normally it was marketed in the powder form, and to prescribe or to give for the children, one company called the elixir, this elixir they manufactured for the first time it in the form of a liquid. So in the liquid form they made it, the syrup form they manufactured it. For making them it into the syrup form they added a solvent, and the solvent used was diethylene glycol. But the diethylene glycol was previously used as an antifreeze agent. Because of this dry ethylene glycol containing sulfonamide, this acted as a toxin, and what happened is nearly 100 plus children died. As we have seen in the past, whenever such kind of a tragedy happens, it acts as an eye-opener, and the response was the US Congress passed the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act in 1938. The incident happened in 1937. The next year itself, they amended a new law which is called as Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act. As per this, for the first time, companies were required to prove their product are safe before marketing them. And another incident was the sulfathiazole tragedy. In 1941, nearly 300 people were killed or injured by sulfathiazole tablet. Sulfathiazole tablet were being used as an antibacterial agent. But what happened was this sulfur drug was being contaminated with a sedative, phenobarbital. And this incident led into the introduction of the concept of good manufacturing practices. So, which can avoid the cross contamination, which can avoid the mix. So, these are the some of the important aspect that we can achieve when we incorporate the GMP into our system. The cross contamination and mix up can be prevented. So, how the GMP is being evolved? It is in 1941, as we have already discussed, the sulfur thiazole tablet which have been contaminated with the phenobarbital, and what happened is in 1941 nearly 300 people either died or they are injured, and as a result the FDA enforced, revived the manufacturing and quality control requirement, and as a result the first GMP is being born, and as per that the clarity or a certificate of purity is made mandatory. So as per the FDA, the certification of drug is made as mandatory. So you can also see that during the Second World War, the batch certification of FDA became a requirement for certain drugs. It required the company to submit samples from each lot to FDA for testing, and the agency would give permission for their release only after testing. The practice has begun in 1941 for insulin, and it continued till 1945 for other antibiotics, like penicillin, and was later expanded to include all other antibiotics. By 1983, the requirement for batch certification of drug was dropped. It was being dropped in 1983. But again, because of that, what happened? Again, one more tragedy happened in 1955. The polio vaccine tragedy happened. The Jonas Salk discovered the way to vaccine against polio. Many manufacturers began making the polio vaccine. One company failed to inactivate the virus completely in a single lot. What happened? Around 60 children died because of this polio. After this incident, FDA started ensuring the safety of the vaccine. Thalidomide tragedy was another eye-opener. Thalidomide was marketed in Europe as a sleeping pill, and it also was being used for controlling the morning sickness in pregnant women. But there was no proof whether we can use it against for morning sickness. But ultimately, what happened? Without any evidence, many physicians prescribed this thalidomide for controlling this morning sickness. The result was thalidomide showed a teratogenic effect, which caused serious deformalities in developing fetus. It has been estimated that nearly 10,000 cases of infants with various kinds of deformalities were born. And this again happened as an eye-opener, and it made a public opinion, and the legislators pushed more stringent legislation through Congress that required companies to test not only to ensure that the product were safe, but that they were effectiveness for their intended use. It was pinpointing, regulating the clinical trials. The amendment required drug to be tested in animals before people. Previously, it was directly being tested on human beings. So, this incident act as an eye opener where the need of preclinical research is being opened. And the few other amendment, you can see that in 1962 the Kefauver-Harris drug amendment, 1963 the first GMP for the finished pharmaceutical drug were made into fine. In 1970s, especially if you look into 1978, the GMP for drugs is being published, where 21 CFR part 210 and 211 were greatly expanded, and the medical devices, that is 21 CFR 820. And in 1979, the GLP, good laboratory practices, were made into fine. So we already discussed at the beginning itself, this is how the GMP is being born. The GMP is good manufacturing practices. Across the world it is being called as the GMP, it is being abbreviated as GMP, but in US it is called it as the current good manufacturing practices. Now, who sets the guideline for GMP? That will be a question. Various regulatory agencies, nationally or internationally, various regulatory agencies. For each nations, they will have their own guidelines, or they follow a common guideline. Either they will have their own guideline, each nation will have their own guideline, or they will follow a common guideline like ICH guidelines. So the most common standards that being issued are either by the World Health Organization or US FDA. So the WHO GMP as well as the FDA GMP guidelines are more referred. So this is the timeline which we discussed about it in the beginning itself. And these are the references for today's topic. 2 references. Thank you. Please ask your questions if you have any doubt, if you have any kind of queries regarding the evolution of GMP. Please put on your comment box. Thank you. See you in the next class with another topic.